There's something poetic about the way Fantastic Four First Steps collapsed. It opened strong, critics liked it, audiences gave it a solid Rotten Tomato score, and even Critical Drinker, who's not shy about calling out mediocrity, gave it a good review. But then came the second weekend, a 66% drop, headlines calling it a box office flop, and suddenly, the narrative shifted from MCU rebound to genre collapse. But this isn't just about one movie. It's about a genre that's run its course. It's about superhero fatigue, cinematic universe fatigue, and the inevitable decline of a storytelling model that was never built to last. Let's start with the obvious. Fantastic Four has never been a strong franchise. The 2005 film and its sequel, Rise of the Silver Surfer, were modest successes, grossing $333 million and $301 million respectively. They weren't cultural events, they were placeholders. And the 2015 reboot, Fant Four Stick, was a rights retention exercise that bombed spectacularly. So when Eric Kane at Forbes pointed out that First Steps cratered not just because of genre fatigue, but because it's a Fantastic Four movie, he wasn't wrong. The IP itself is weak. It doesn't have the emotional resonance or cultural weight of Spider-Man, Batman, or Superman. And speaking of Superman, James Gunn's reboot is another cautionary tale. Despite being part of the superhero Holy Trinity, Gunn's Superman hasn't matched Man of Steel's global box office. It's doing fine domestically, but internationally, it's lagging. And that's despite Man of Steel being controversial, especially the moment when Superman kills General Zod. Audiences still embrace Henry Cavill's portrayal. His firing after Black Adam bombed fractured fan goodwill, and Gunn's reboot, while technically competent, feels like another cog in a cinematic machine that lost its soul. Now, some might point to Pedro Pascal's overexposure as a factor in Fantastic Four's underperformance. He's everywhere. The Last of Us, The Mandalorian, Materialist, Eddington, and now Fantastic Four. Even Gladiator 2. His schedule even disrupted production on the horror film Weapons, forcing a complete recast. But let's be honest, even without Pedro Pascal, First Steps would be in this position. The problem isn't the actor, it's the system. The MCU hasn't had a single box office hit in 2025. Captain America Brave New World reportedly ballooned to a $400 million budget after extensive reshoots, making profitability nearly impossible even with a decent domestic haul. Thunderbolts outright lost money, according to Variety, marking one of Marvel's most costly misfires. Ironheart came and went on Disney Plus, barely making a ripple, and the upcoming slate, Wonder Man, Marvel Zombies, Eyes of Wakanda, feels more like contractual obligations than cultural events. This isn't just a dip, it's a genre in decline. In cinematic universes, they're collapsing. Sony's Spider-Verse, which began with The Amazing Spider-Man released in 2012 and teased a Sinister Six spinoff, was completely abandoned. Universal's Dark Universe launched with The Mummy starring Tom Cruise and died immediately. Ghostbusters 2016 was supposed to kick off a new universe but fizzled. The DCEU itself was a mess, with only Wonder Woman receiving widespread praise and Aquaman becoming the highest grossing entry at $1.15 billion globally, proof that box office doesn't equal quality. Even Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which came close to $1 billion, had a reported budget north of $400 million. That's razor-thin profit margins, not sustainable. And Spider-Man No Way Home? Sure, it made nearly $2 billion globally, but Spider-Man is an outlier. He's part of the superhero Holy Trinity. He's the exception, not the rule. There's a video by Bullets and Blockbusters that pins the collapse of the Multiverse saga on Jonathan Majors, but that's a flawed premise. Majors didn't cause the Multiverse saga to fall apart, the multiverse itself did. Multiverses in storytelling are inherently lazy. When there are infinite versions of every character, stakes vanish. If one Kang the Conqueror is defeated, another takes his place. If Ant-Man dies, there's another Ant-Man. If Sam Wilson's Captain America falls or fails, there's another waiting in the wings. The narrative becomes a revolving door of interchangeable parts. Even though Everything Everywhere All at Once won Best Picture, audiences are starting to see through the multiverse gimmick. It's not new. Back in 2001, there was a movie called The One starring Jet Li, Carla Gugino, and Jason Statham. That explored the multiverse concept long before it was trendy, and critics weren't kind at the time. It holds a 14% on Rotten Tomatoes and grossed just $43 million domestically, $79.6 million worldwide. Despite the multiverse craze, the one never got rediscovered. There's a reason for that. The concept doesn't hold up unless the story has emotional weight and thematic clarity. Marvel leaned heavily into the multiverse branding, yet only 3 Phase 4 projects truly explored it. Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange The Multiverse of Madness, and Loki Season 1. That's it. The rest were multiverse adjacent at best. The problem isn't majors, it's the illusion of infinite possibilities without consequence. Audiences crave stakes, not endless variations. It's a symptom of a larger problem. Hollywood's addiction to novelty without narrative discipline. The multiverse promised infinite storytelling potential, but delivered diminishing emotional returns. When every character is replaceable and every outcome reversible, audiences disengage. And that disengagement isn't confined to superheroes. It's part of a broader pattern. That broader pattern, you might ask? It's the rise and fall of genre dominance, a cycle Hollywood knows all too well. Superheroes aren't the first to suffer from creative exhaustion. Westerns once ruled the mid-20th century, only to vanish as audience taste shifted. Musicals dominated the 1940s and 50s with classics like Singin' in the Rain and The Sound of Music. But by the late 60s, they faded into niche territory. Even modern successes like La La Land, which earned $472 million globally, are remembered more for the infamous Oscar flub when Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway mistakenly announced it as Best Picture instead of Moonlight, than for reigniting the genre. The Greatest Showman, despite its star power with Hugh Jackman, Zac Efron, and Zendaya, didn't explode out of the gate either. It built momentum slowly, eventually grossing $435 million. The point is, novelty fades. Without strong storytelling, even the most vibrant genres lose their grip. And while High School Musical became a cultural phenomenon, its success was confined to television. High School Musical 2 still holds the record for the most watched Disney Channel original movie, beating Monday Night Football on ESPN. High School Musical 3 made $253 million on an $11 million budget, but it was the exception, not the rule. Camp Rock, despite being simulcast on ABC and ABC Family along with the Disney Channel, never reached the same heights. The lesson here is clear. Genres rise, peak, and decline. Westerns, musicals, disaster films, film noir, beach movies, biker flicks, Bond knockoffs, kung fu cinema, rom-coms. They all had their moment. They all faded. Superhero films are now in their death spiral. The formula is exhausted. The novelty is gone. And cinematic universes, once seen as the future, are now cautionary tales. And those who argue that superhero fatigue doesn't exist are being willfully ignorant of film history. Musicals, western, biker movies, and kung fu cinema were once dominant genres, but they faded. Sure, we still get films like Ong Bak, Into the Blue, or 3:10 to Yuma starring Christian Bale and Russell Crowe, but that doesn't mean kung fu movies, beach movies, or westerns are suddenly popular again. There will always be outliers, the exception to every rule. The MCU wasn't just a successful franchise, it was a black swan event. In the moment, no one could fully grasp why it worked. Only in hindsight does its success seem obvious. The right characters, the right actors, the right timing. But studios mistook anomaly for blueprint. That's why the 2010s were littered with failed cinematic universes. Sony's Spider-Verse, Universal's Dark Universe, the DCEU, even Ghostbusters 2016. They tried to replicate something that couldn't be replicated. Luck isn't a strategy, and that luck has run out. Look, there's no denying the MCU's place in film history. The Infinity Saga was unprecedented, not just in scale, but in structure. It was the first cinematic universe to deliver a continuous narrative with a clear beginning, middle, and end. 2012's The Avengers will be remembered as the first superhero crossover event to truly reshape blockbuster filmmaking. But the MCU didn't know when to quit. Instead of ending on a high note with Endgame, it kept going, diluting its legacy with diminishing returns. Had it walked away then, it might have remained a cultural landmark. Now, Disney, Kevin Feige, and Marvel Studios are paying the price. Everyone eventually has to pay the piper. The only question is, how high of a tab do you want to run before the bill comes due? And that's exactly where superhero cinema finds itself now. Audiences are no longer showing up just because a film is part of a universe. They want stories that matter, characters they care about, innovation, not repetition. Studios have run up the tab on audience goodwill, and now the bill is due. Until they recognize this, we'll keep seeing flops like Fantastic Four First Steps, films that collapse under the weight of their own irrelevance. So let's open this up. Are we witnessing the final days of superhero dominance? Is Pedro Pascal's omnipresence a symptom or a scapegoat? What genre do you think deserves a comeback? Noir, westerns, musical, something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about what cinema could be once it's free from the shackles of the cinematic universe. The superhero genre's decline isn't just a matter of oversaturation or fatigue, it's a reflection of a broader cultural shift. Audiences are yearning for stories that resonate on a deeper level, narratives that challenge conventions and explore uncharted territories. The era of capes and cinematic universes may be fading, but this opens the door for a renaissance in filmmaking, one where creativity and authenticity take center stage. And while many critics and analysts have pointed to creative fatigue and franchise mismanagement, there's another factor that's starting to gain traction, one that's echoed in the comments section of Emergency Awesome's recent Fantastic Four First Steps breakdown. Viewers are pointing out that Marvel's problem isn't just storytelling, it's ticket prices. And they're not wrong. Movie tickets today often rival the cost of just buying the film outright on Blu-ray or digital. Matinee showtimes still exist, but matinee pricing? Not so much. You're paying premium rates for off-peak hours, and for what? A film that will likely hit streaming in a few months? Post-COVID audiences have developed a lot more self-restraint. The urgency to see something immediately in theaters has faded. People are more selective, more patient, and more budget conscious. AMC's surge pricing model, where ticket prices increase for high-demand films, has only made things worse. When The Batman released, prices jumped by $1 to $1.50 during its first week. That strategy was deemed a success by AMC CEO, but it's a short-term win with long-term consequences. It reinforces the perception that going to the movies is a luxury, not a default experience. And when the product, like Fantastic Four First Steps, doesn't deliver, audiences feel burned. So why bother? Why spend $15 to $20 per ticket, plus concessions, when you can just wait a few weeks or a couple of months and stream it from your couch? Theaters are pricing themselves out of relevance, especially when the films they're showcasing are part of a genre that's already on life support. And until next time, keep watching, keep thinking, and maybe, just maybe, start looking beyond the cape.